up, everyone? Haha, what's up, everybody? This isn't Wonderwall. Well, let's change that. There's a reason Wonderwall is such a popular song to play on the guitar, y'all. It's very easy and it's very fun. It helps you figure out how to strum rhythmically. How about some Justin Bieber and Kid Laroi? Pretty good? All right, I got one more for y'all, then we'll start the show. Nice. Haven't heard Eddie play before. Thank you. I haven't done it for a while before a stream. It used to be how I opened every stream, but as I've been moving houses, I haven't been playing guitar as much. Messed up. Messed that up too. Alrighty. Gotta practice Ocean Eyes more. Gotta stay on my grind. Do you know any Run the Jewels? Yeah. Hello, how's it going? Lunch break at work right now. Nice. I'm glad I got in time for your lunch break. Play Asturias. It's incredibly difficult. I've never played that. An American with a guitar. Oh no. An hour of power, workers' power. Absolutely, that's what the Power Hour stands for. An hour of workers' power. I'm trapped in an effing Google ad. That sucks. Get ad block. Actually click on our ads so that we get ad revenue and then download ad block. That's the best way to steal from the corporate advertisers and give to Midwestern Marks. Just freaking spam click our ads. The real wonderful wall is the iron will of the United International Proletariat. Damn right. A cap inside. Come on, Eddie. You gotta be no cap inside. It's just good manners. Yeah, I disagree. Because I like to wear hats every single place that I go. Yes, this show just started. The Bard song. Eddie, I was wondering if you and the boys are trying to learn any other languages. I'm currently trying to learn Spanish, Portuguese, and Russian, taking inspiration from Lenin's translations of Marx's German, LOL. I mean, that's a lot of languages to learn all at once for you there, isn't it? How are you learning 3 languages at once? That's pretty hardcore, my man. But yeah, I'm learning Spanish. My dad was a Spanish teacher, so I took through Spanish 4 in high school, but I'm actually on day... Actually, funny that you ask this, because I'm on day 299. You probably can't see it there. The camera's not going to focus, but day 299 of Duolingo. That's Duolingo Spanish, so I'm getting there. My Spanish has gotten much better, but, still a long ways to go, so. What up, Cobra? Play the Last of Us theme. Yeah, I'll just do that quick. Just got out of a meeting at work a little while ago. What's up, Eddie? Not much, Jimmy. Good to have you with us today. Was that an original? No, that was Billie Eilish. I've never made any original songs. I feel like I'm not creative enough music or good enough musically for that. But yeah, what's going on, everyone? We could do some Q&A stuff like I did last night with Carlos. Last night, Carlos and I got on stream and just answered questions and responded to super chats for like 2.5 hours, basically. So I'm down to do that today. If you guys have some good questions, I'll try and get to them, and hopefully we'll get to the super chats first, but it's crazy how bad, but also I have some videos to react to as well. But it's crazy how bad Uber Eats business model is for workers. They only pay $2 to $3 per delivery. Your tip is actually kind of like a bid to get a worker to actually agree to your delivery. If you don't tip and no worker takes your order for a while, Uber actually starts upping how much they pay for the delivery without the tip to encourage someone to take it. So the best thing to do counterintuitively if you don't need food as fast as possible is tip $0. Yeah, that's crazy. And there was a move by, I don't know if it includes Uber Eats drivers. I assume it did, but there was a move to get Uber and Lyft employees classified as just regular employees, right? Because right now they're classified as private contractors so that Uber and Lyft don't have to give them minimum wage or give them normal benefits that regular working people would have. And California, and Carlos wrote an article about this, California passed a law preventing them from doing so, preventing them from being considered as actual workers. It was called like Prop 8 or something like that. I can look it up. Prop 22. Sorry. It was called Prop 22. And yeah, this is a really, really common tactic that modern capitalists are using, in this era of neoliberalism, where they keep their workers listed as private contractors. So it's like, you're not our employee, you're a contractor, you're a small business owner who we hire, when in reality, of course, an Uber, driver, a Lyft driver is an employee for the company, making profit for the company. Of course they are. This is just a semantics game that they use to not give their workers health care, right? To cut costs, to cut labor costs by not providing benefits and not providing substantial wages of any kind. So yeah, it's just a big old scam, honestly, to be completely honest with you. Midwestern Marks at Work. What's up, comrades? What's up? Glad to have you with us, Joey C. Glad we could brighten your workday a little bit. Or at least I hope so. I'm right. I'm learning 3 languages at once. Expert of a letter written from a mental institution. Rude. And then when the person comes, give them a real tip. That makes sense. The stereotype of the talented communist who can do a bit of everything. Is that a stereotype? I try and live up to that. Same trick Vince uses with WWE. Yeah, the private contractor thing. It's the same thing with the UFC. And I was actually watching a video about the WWE on my way home from the National Wrestling Tournament yesterday, or 2 days ago, whatever it was. And I was like, wow, the WWE is exactly the same as the UFC. The way that their fighters get literal brain damage and get beat up, and then they get shamed by Vince McMahon or Dana White if they don't do what the company wants, if they don't do what's best for the company. And the company won't even cover their health care, though. And is constantly driving down fighter pay. And those wrestlers, those WWE wrestlers, man, you may think wrestling's fake. Yeah, and it is. It's scripted. But they get beat up. Every day, they're jumping off ropes and getting concussions and taking injuries. So it's no walk in the park. So hey, Eddie, first time watching you live. Thank you for all you and the Institute do. Greetings from Los Angeles. Thank you. I'm glad you appreciate it and enjoy it. We will definitely keep it going. We will never stop. So greetings from the Midwest. We got people from the Midwest to LA. And there's pride in every American heart. And it's time to stand and say, I'm proud to be an American. Where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the man who died and gave that right to me. How was that? The Reebok deal was horrible for the UFC. Yeah. And what was funny, so like the UFC fighters before the Reebok deal, they were allowed to have sponsorships. They were allowed to have whatever private sponsors they wanted, and people would pay them to put their logo on their fight shorts or on their, they have these had these big flags that they would pull out before the fight. And then the UFC, when they were getting complaints about fighter pay, they're like, don't worry, we're on top of it. We're going to fix fighter pay. That's what Dana White was saying. He's like, trust me, we're going to get the fighters way more money. We're working with Reebok to get them way more money. So they signed this deal with Reebok to where the fighters can't have any other sponsorships besides Reebok. right? That's the only sponsor they're allowed to have. And it ends up being a huge loss of money for every fighter. And when Dana White was questioned about it, he was like, nope, nope, nope. They're making more money now. And all the fighters were going to the media and being like, nope, we're making less money. He's lying. But then what the UFC does is if you question them, if you ask Dana White tough questions, especially about fighter pay, they revoke your press pass. So you're not allowed to come to the UFC's press conferences and ask questions and things like that. They did this to Ariel Helwani, one of the most famous, probably the most famous journalist in MMA. He doesn't have a press pass, which, you know, for a smaller journalist or for someone who works for a corporation like ESPN, that's killer, right? Then you don't have access to the fighters, which is what people are willing to pay for the most part. So they've basically systematically rooted out any kind of criticism from the UFC media. So yeah, I don't know if people care about this. I apologize for going on a rant about the UFC, but it is quite ridiculous. Let's get into our first video for today. This is nothing too groundbreaking, but yeah, be sure if you have questions for a Q&A segment, ask them in the chat. I'll try to get to your questions. Obviously, I'll get the super chats first, but for now, we'll jump into our first video.
No, I'm very much in support of all the unions. It's a job like any other.
This is Margot Robbie, aka one of the biggest heartthrobs in Hollywood right now. She just played Barbie. And what else was she in? Suicide Squad. She was the joke Harley Quinn. She was Harley Quinn. That's when everyone like fell in love with her.
No,
she was also in that hilarious figure skating movie about Tanya Harding, the girl who bashed in her opponent's knees before the Olympics, or had paid her boyfriend to break her opponent's knees with a baseball bat before the Olympics. True story, by the way, and they made a movie about it.
Very much in support of all the unions. It's a job like any other, and actors, like other workers, can join the union. My union is Actors Equity, which is part of the Media Alliance, which covers performers and journalists and anyone working in media and entertainment. Sometimes issues come up with our pay slips and stuff, and overtime. There's just technical things that, for someone who's new to acting, you don't know what it's about or what you're actually entitled to. And being a part of the union, I can then go to our union representative, who is Alan Fletcher at work, Dr. Carl, and just make sure that I'm not being ripped off. And it's good to know that there are things they should be abiding by and stuff we are entitled to make sure we get correct pay or breaks or overtime. Just don't be afraid to ask and sort of demand your rights, because you do have them. And I know how it feels when you're new and you're starting a job and you're at the very bottom of the pecking order. I've been in the position where I've been too nervous to ask because I don't want to cause a fuss. But if I knew that I was actually entitled to those things, it would have been a lot easier to sort out at the time. It's really easy now that I'm a union member. All I have to do is call up Actors Equity or send them an email. Even if it's just a trivial question, they're still there to answer, and they have all the answers. And sometimes if you're younger, you feel like it's not your place to ask or bring up something, but you have rights like everyone else, and you should stand up for them.
That was awesome. That was like basic union education that you could give to anybody. And you hear her saying, like, I support any and all union, which is why, like, yeah, there's a distinction in Marxism between unproductive labor and productive labor, right? There's all these debates about, like, even transport workers, like truckers, like Marx is talking about, is this productive labor or unproductive labor? Because nothing's actually being created. You're just transporting value from one point to another, but that's part of the circulation of capital as a whole. That's part of the production process and the distribution process and the sale of the commodity and the whole flow of the capitalist system. So I think, it makes perfect sense to support any kind of union, right? Like there's all this debate. We shouldn't support the actors unions. We shouldn't support the baristas because they're not productive labor. Like maybe they're not, maybe we can say these are unproductive workers, but Marx never says, we should only support productive workers. We should only support productive unions, right? It's a theoretical debate about where value is produced. And it's good to understand that. It's good to have that debate. It's good to discuss what constitutes a productive worker and what doesn't, right? But it's not a debate so that we can, toss to the side like the writers and actors strike that's going on right now, or toss to the side the baristas and say that, their struggle as working people doesn't matter. Especially if you look at America right now, and like there is a lot of I guess revolutionary sentiment, or there's a lot of desire for class struggle, I guess, for lack of a better word, among the industrial working class, among the blue collar workers and stuff. But a lot of the motion right now, a lot of the unionization efforts, a lot of the people who are ideologically socialists are like Starbucks workers and Amazon workers. So I think it's a really, really, really stupid strategy to see all these people who are organizing into unions, organizing against some of the largest corporations, some of the largest capitalist institutions in our capitalist system, and be like, they don't matter. They're pieces of crap. Screw them. Screw their struggle. Screw them fighting for better wages. They're a bunch of losers. We only need the industrial proletariat. Like, we do need the industrial proletariat. Like, we won't be able to do anything until we can organize blue collar industrial workers. But that doesn't mean you have to shit all over the organizing efforts of, Starbucks workers, Amazon warehouse workers. Like we should welcome those people getting involved in the class struggle. And even more so than that, we should welcome those people organizing their specific workplaces, right? If you're against people organizing their workplace, like what kind of communist are you? Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Thank you, David, for the super chat. Super to have you here with us. Good afternoon. Appreciate the $5 super chat so much. These super chats are vital to doing what we do at our project. They're the main source of revenue for the project. Well, our Patreon is there too, patreon.com/MidwesternMarks. But yeah, if anybody has questions that they want to ask or topics that they want to discuss on the stream today, shoot it over in a super chat and we'll have an in-depth discussion about it. And we also got a new YouTube member. Oh, where'd it go? Junkie, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. Really appreciate that. Remember, $10 Patreon supporters and $10 YouTube members have access to Carlos's new book, The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism. Fantastic new book that we've been promoting heavily because we think it's really important. So, check it out. Check it out and make sure to take advantage of that if you are a Patreon or YouTube member. In the community tab of our YouTube page is where you find the download link for that. So Christian Elon Ortiz, all the unions organized together. Yeah, that's what's really cool about the Teamsters is they won't cross any picket line, right? The Teamsters, like the other day, the SAG-AFTRA union and the writers and the actors formed a picket line in front of a Marvel set. We covered this. And Hassan Piker and Adam Ruins Everything, Adam Conover were there. But they formed a picket line, and then because they had that picket line, the Teamsters wouldn't cross it because the Teamsters honor any union and honor any picket line in order to show solidarity. So you had like all these delivery trucks who wouldn't take supplies to the Marvel set, and they shut down this whole multi-million-dollar Marvel movie shoot. So pretty awesome to see the solidarity between all the unions. And I think it's wrecker behavior to try and bust up that kind of solidarity, right? To be like, well, some of these workers are productive and some are unproductive, so they should hate each other and fight rather than show solidarity. Like, why? Who does that help? Please tell me who that helps. You guys are just angry at people who work at Starbucks for some reason. Eddie, I want you to body slam me into a wall immediately. All right, I got you. Fair enough. I will slam you. The only skilled worker on the job site in years will be the 3D printer. Y'all better prepare now. Where's the best place to support? I know YouTube takes like 30%. Yeah, Patreon is pretty good. Patreon.com/MidwesternMarks. Obviously, you know, we appreciate YouTube support as well, and that's where like a lot of our support comes from. And then if you wanted to support me specifically, you could go to buymeacoffee/Eddie Liger. On my Twitter account. I can't call it my Twitter account anymore. That's on my X account. If anyone wants to support me on Buy Me a Coffee, just go to my X account. What the hell? What kind of world do we live in now where Twitter is being called X? Have you guys seen this? What the hell is this? X. Actually, a few years ago, they changed the wrestling Olympic trials to something called Final X, like to be modern and cool and edgy. And the logo for Twitter looks the exact same as the Final X logo. But yeah, my Buy Me a Coffee link is there. buymeacoffee/Eddie Liger, so you can support there too. I tweeted something. Can't believe Elon changed the Twitter logo to Z and announced his support for the Russian special military operation. I would have preferred this to X, right? If they just changed it to Z and then all the liberals like fled from the app, that would be a huge positive change for me. Changing it to X, don't really care. And their videos are now X videos. Nice. Nice. What a good joke. Elon is more cringe than me. X is what I put in all my gamer tags. Yeah. At the end of the day, Elon's just like a nerdy gamer guy who also has billions of dollars. Musk's obsession with the word X or letter X has been a thing since his early days in the internet biz. PayPal was originally X.com. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Well, I mean, they have SpaceX and stuff. It makes sense. All right, y'all, I have to pee really bad. I'm a hydrated boy today, so let me give you something to watch. Actually, I don't know if I've played my matches from this year. Y'all haven't seen me wrestling this year yet. Did have some matches. Here's my matches versus a guy named Ratbek Erkinbekov. I don't know. It's some kind of foreign name. I don't know where he was from. Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan or something. BRB.
More than 20,000 events a year can be watched live, on demand, across the Flow Sports Network, including today's event. Download the Flow Sports app to your Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Chromecast. So with your mobile device, all you gotta do is go to Flow Sports, iOS, and Android apps. That's Flow Sports, L-O Sports.
Red.
Cody Godet, California, at 6. First call. Godet.
How am I doing? Oh, now I'm covering the scoreboard.
At 6. First call.
Hey, this should have been a tech.
Battle that last one.
right? You have to let the guy go all the way back down so he can defend himself. But a couple times I didn't hear, but a couple times I was close enough. Like, that should have been 2.
White paddle at initial position.
That should have been 2 also.
2 red.
And this guy in the middle's giving me 2, but the side judges are taking the points away. So I thought I had scored like 18 points here.
2
And then I look up and there's 6.
red,
I'm
1
like,
blue.
what the
Keep
hell?
wrestling.
Should be a tech fall.
Continuous action.
Because if you get up by 8, the match is over and you win. So I was like, am I not up by 8? I just turned the guy like 700 times. They're like, nope, you're up by 6. I'm like, okay, well, my arms are really tired now, so screw you guys. And it's always like the most frustrating things when the refs make bad calls too, because like, no offense to this guy, he's a nice guy. But like the refs look like this. And then, you know, they screw you over. It's like, you don't understand how hard I work for this, for you to screw me over. So there they call me for stepping on the foot. Look, they're about to call me for stepping on the foot. I kind of step on his foot, but like that, I wasn't able to take him down because I was stepped on the foot. And right here, when I get the takedown, I'm stepping on the mat. Right? I wasn't like,
stop.
Stepping on the foot wouldn't even help me there. Right? That's a move where you use your hip. It's all in the hip. And if you plant your foot, you're allowed to plant it. But these refs don't know that because the refs have never wrestled Greco before. They've never actually done the sport. So they don't freaking get it. And it's the most frustrating thing, and it's one of the major problems.
Stepping on the foot, red. Tension red.
Literally last year at this same tournament, I came off the mat and I told the refs, I'm like, it's a freaking embarrassment to our country for the calls that you guys make. Look how tall this dude was. And I cut a ton of weight for this tournament. I was so much stronger than him though. Well, and that's what happened. They made me score 800 points on him to get the tag, like, and I did the exact same move that I did before. Look, not stepping on the foot. They just hate me. They hate me because I post pictures of myself standing next to the USA Wrestling logo and say the future of the USA is communist. So I think USA Wrestling told all the refs, like, do not let this kid into the finals. Do not let this dude into the finals. Otherwise, we're going to have to interview him. And he's going to start screaming about how communism will win. So no matter how well I wrestle, I have a conspiracy theory that USA Wrestling's just going to block me from the finals. Classic Pat Sock, Eddie Liger. They warned me about you. Yes, dude. I shouldn't be wrestling for USA Wrestling. I should move to a different country. Otherwise, I'm a Pat Sock. Or you know, if you win the Olympics, you run around. They give you an American flag, and you're supposed to run around with it while they take pictures. You know, if I do that, if I win the Olympics, I'm a Pat Sock. So I have to purposefully lose in order to appease the leftists on Twitter. Do you place highly in U.S. wrestling? These are all American awards here. So that's for top 8 at national tournaments. So like 3 of those are from university nationals, which is like for college kids. And I got third, and fourth there. And then the rest are from senior level nationals where I've gotten like 8th, 7th, and 5th. 5th was the best I did at seniors so far. But Pat Sock is a little too close to net. No, Pat Sock is a joke, James Ed Smith. Pat Sock is something that people on Twitter call you when they see you wrestling on top of the USA Wrestling logo or something. Yeah. And every socialist movement throughout history was patriotic. It's when you get into nationalism and ultra nationalism that it becomes dangerous. But like, I'm not gonna become an ultra nationalist by wrestling for the USA Wrestling organization. Like, it is a joke. I'm sorry. Is Bad Empanada a third world Maoist? Incoherent? Seems like it. seems like it, and I like a lot of Bad Empanada's stuff. He has a lot, like his Che Guevara video, for example. That's a very good video. And he does a lot of good research when it comes to stuff like that, but then he'll say stuff like, why would we organize the U.S. troops? Why would we organize people who are in the military who want to become communists? They're evil and serving the empire. It's like, well, in Russia during the revolution would have been impossible if they didn't get the military on their side, right? And Russia was an imperialist nation. People often say that only in imperialized or colonized nations have there been successful struggles for socialism. Not true. Russia wasn't one of the strongest imperialist nations. They might have been the weakest, but they were an imperialist nation. And Lenin and the Bolsheviks went to the soldiers, went to the troops who were being sent to fight and die in wars for expansion for the Tsarist monarchy. And they said, we need to organize against this. Come join us as the communists so we can fight against the imperial war machine. And they got a lot of them on their side. So for us in the U.S., in an imperialist country where people are constantly being sent to fight and die for wars of expansion in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and Libya, why would we not do the same thing? Why would we not go to people who were tricked into joining the military by recruiters when they were in high school or college and explain how the imperialist death machine works and explain how to take it down? We can get a lot of people on our side. So yeah, that's where I have my major disagreements with Bad Empanada, but he also has done a lot of good work. So, are you excited for hot labor summer? Yes, I've been cutting down, I've been grinding, I've been doing pull-ups. I'm ready for hot labor summer. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat, Pranav. Appreciate that. What is one of my buddies on Twitter has his name right now is Hot Labor. Yeah, the union movements are popping off right now. Class struggles popping off. So I hope it's a hot labor summer. I know some people who don't watch your stuff because they thought you entertained Pat Socks too much. My stuff isn't for everybody. I'm still going to tell you what I think. I'm still going to tell you what I think is the truth. And that's the Eddie Liger guarantee. I'll never bullshit you because I think that it's gonna attract more leftists or attract more liberals or whatever. And I try and give the message in a palatable way. But at the end of the day, I'm going to stand by my principles. And there are people from the other side of the coin. They're like infrared people who, are always calling me a liberal and saying like, you're just, pandering to your liberal base. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm telling you what I think is true. I'm telling you what my principles are. I'm telling you what I think will be successful for organizing socialism in America. And if you think I'm wrong, tell me why you think I'm wrong. Explain why you think I'm wrong, or don't watch the videos. That's fine. But anybody who's actually taken the time to listen to me and Carlos talk about patriotism and our view of patriotism and our view of the quote unquote Pat Socks knows that, we're not just like flag waving ultra nationalists, or we're not people who say that we need to support U.S. imperialism because it leads to more wealth for U.S. workers or, whatever kind of BS opportunism we could fall into. Right? No, the idea is that we need to organize people around a path of construction. Oh, damn it. Stupid camera. But we need to organize people based on making America better, making it or sublating it, not just destroying it. You're never going to be able to go to all the working people in this country and say, hey, let's burn the American flag and destroy our own country. Like, you're not going to galvanize people that way. You're not going to organize people that way. You need to offer people something better. You need to offer them socialism. You need to offer them the construction of a new and better society that takes care of all of us and allows for all of us to flourish and decreases the hours of work and increases wages and, provides all these benefits and transitions to a system that's entirely dominated by the workers, a classless system. We need to offer that, not just say, let's burn down our own country. Let's destroy our own country because our country has done bad things historically, because we've been the imperialist hegemon historically. Russia, at the time of the Bolshevik Revolution, had been historically bad and historically imperialist and autocratic and had a huge, huge, huge problem with anti-Semitism, right? But that was the kind of stuff that the Bolsheviks combated and said, let's make it something great. And guess what they did? They did make it something great. The Soviet Union, which now lives here in our hearts. In the protests in Israel yesterday, people had DPRK flags signaling we're now a dictatorship like them. Libs wilding. Oh my gosh, the ridiculousness. There's some of the Zionist arguments, and I don't know the kind of people who were, I haven't looked into the protests in Israel, but like some Zionists make the most insane arguments. I wish I could find this on TikTok, but it would take me too long to find it, and I don't want to search it up right now. But there was a TikTok a while back where they were saying, do you love communism? Then come to Israel. And it proceeds to be like this 2-minute long ad trying to say that Israel is communist. And if you want to live in a communist or socialist utopia, just move to Israel and become a settler. Like, goodness gracious, colonial communism, I guess. But I mean, that's how Zionism has always been pitched, dude. Like, obviously, there's the right wing of Zionism, and there's the left wing, more progressive wing, which is what a lot of the debates going on in Israel are raging over right now, because the far right is gaining power. Which, go figure, when you have a colonial apartheid state, you'd imagine that the far right is going to gain power with time. But Zionism has always been pitched as this like progressive thing, right? We need to create this progressive utopia in the Middle East, the only democracy in the Middle East. And it's also, you know, there's a racist element to it, or a bigoted element to it, where they're like, you know, these Arab countries or Iran, they can't be democratic, only Israel can. You know, we need to bring them democracy through colonialism. So it's always been a tactic of the Zionists. I'm sad the Communist Party of Israel has failed to gain any support, which I'm with, has failed to gain any support in these protests. That is too bad. I don't know anything about the Communist Party of Israel. What's their position on the occupation of Palestine? They chant, "We're not Iran" in the protests, and Biden save us. Goodness. Wow. Democracy just means white people live here. It literally, like, calling Israel the only democracy in the Middle East is so ridiculous. And I mean, obviously democracy and freedom are just buzzwords that the U.S. imperialists use at a whim to call U.S. enemy states undemocratic and authoritarian. But yeah, when it's applied to Israel, it just seems even a little more ridiculous. Like, is that what democracies do? They shoot missiles at kids in Gaza and call it mowing the grass by reducing the population to a suitable point. Is that democratic? What about the 11 Palestinian children who were seeking trauma care in their homes from the last time they got hit by a missile, who then got hit by another missile and were killed a year or two ago? Where's the democracy for them? Did they choose? Did they vote to have missiles launched at them? There's no democracy in an apartheid state. It shouldn't even have to be said. The current party is anti-Zionist, Marxist-Leninist officially. Interesting. That'd be something good to something interesting to look into. So moving on to another one of our videos for today. Ukraine recently claimed responsibility for drones that hit Moscow. So the U.S. gave Ukraine the go-ahead a while back to start drone striking territory in Russia, which is just one of a million examples of this being a NATO proxy war against Russia, right? They talk about, how is Russia acting in self-defense? How is Russia acting to protect their own national security? Meanwhile, the U.S. is giving Ukraine drones, giving them millions of dollars to buy weapons, and then giving them the go-ahead to attack people in Russia, to destroy Russian buildings, to hit Russian civilians. So this is just one example of this war being a NATO proxy war against Russia, which it always has been, of course. But yeah, the fact that they're shooting drones at Moscow is pretty crazy. It's an escalation. And, Zelensky at this point is, we're reaching the most scary point in the war, right? Because Zelensky is basically a cornered animal. And we know the U.S. does not care about freedom and democracy in Ukraine. And they care even less about what happens to Volodymyr Zelensky. He is nothing to NATO except for a pawn to achieve their geopolitical ambitions. And, that's going to be made apparent soon enough. But the people who are naive enough to think that the U.S. government and the State Department cares about freedom and democracy in Ukraine, like, I have a bridge to sell you if you believe that. But as soon as, Zelensky's not of any use to him, they'll ditch him, right? And they're continuing to push Zelensky to not sign a peace agreement, to keep fighting down to the last Ukrainian. And the idea is, we'll use Zelensky as long as we can to weaken Russia as much as we can, until Russia is basically forced to depose Zelensky, take him out of power, arrest him or whatever, have him executed. So Zelensky now is getting to the point where he sees the writing on the wall, and the only way for him to survive is if he gets NATO involved, right? If he really escalates this thing into World War III and gets the West to come to his aid, which would, of course, be the end of Western civilization as we know it and would possibly lead to full-on nuclear warfare. But, Zelensky has no choice. Like I said, he's a cornered animal. So, we're getting to an extremely dangerous part in the war where Zelensky's provoking Russia. He's calling for the U.S. to give him nuclear weapons, just insane stuff. But, from his perspective, it makes sense. Like, think about the position that guy's in. He's been a pawn of the U.S., and then Russia invades his country, and now Russia's getting closer to Kiev, right? He knows that the U.S., they often put these dictators in power. They often bring these dictators to power, like they did with Saddam Hussein. And then once those dictators aren't useful for him, let them go, take them out, or let them be taken out.
Now, Russia and Ukraine are accusing each other of launching a new wave of drone attacks overnight. In the Odessa region, Ukraine says Russia has targeted more of its ports, this time along the Danube River. Officials say 6 people were wounded in the strikes, several storage tanks were damaged, and a grain hangar was destroyed. In Moscow, meantime, the defense ministry says it intercepted 2 drones in what is being called a terror attack by Kyiv. This video, geolocated by CNN, appears to show one of the drones flying above the Russian capital. It happened as more attacks were reported in Crimea, where Russia says 17 Ukrainian drones were launched. CNN's Claire Sebastian joining us with more. Claire, what more do we know about the Moscow drone attack?
Yeah, we're looking at 2 locations. One very, very central, where the state media news agency TASS reported in the morning that debris was found, the road was briefly closed. This was very close to the Russian Defense Ministry, really just about a 10-minute drive from the Kremlin. So this, well, the whole incident, I think, is the 4th.
So 10 minutes from the Kremlin, 10 minutes from the Kremlin, a few miles from the defense agency. Like, please, can anybody put the shoe on the other foot and think about what if Russia was doing this to us? What if Russia sold or handed Mexico billions of dollars worth of drone technology and was training up troops in Mexico and influencing Mexican politics and even doing a coup in Mexico in 2014 so that they can gain a greater military foothold in Mexico? And then they started launching drones at Washington, D.C., and then they started launching drones 10 minutes from the White House or a few blocks from the U.S. State Department. That is the actual equivalent of what the U.S. is doing to Russia. We overthrew their government in 2014. We increased NATO military capacity and presence in Ukraine heavily. We've given Ukraine billions and billions of dollars in weapons, and they're using those weapons to launch attacks 10 minutes from the Kremlin, right outside the equivalent of the State Department in Russia. And people still act like they don't see, how Russia could be defending themselves or defending their national security, or they still don't think that Russia there's any legitimate security threats towards Russia. Like the stupidity of that, the stupidity of people like Vaush, who told me that if the U.S. wanted to take out Ukraine, they could just go in through Estonia, or if the U.S. wanted to take out Russia, they could just go in through Estonia, which is absurd. Every time Russia's been attacked historically, it's been through Ukraine, or the landmass that now is Ukraine.
Fourth time we've seen Moscow targeted with drones. This is the most central location we've seen since that very first incident when the Kremlin itself was actually hit. So that's significant. The second location down in the southern part of the city, a non-residential building sustaining some damage. Take a listen to one of the residents close by about what she heard.
I was asleep and was woken up by an explosion. Everything started to shake. It felt like the whole building had come down. I looked out of the window. I live in the neighboring building on the side where there's less damage, and it felt strange. The damage was so minor. Well, okay, not minor. Any explosion is scary, but it sounded worse than it looked, as it seemed like the whole mall had exploded. After that, I looked online and saw the amount of damage from this side, and we came and had a look from here.
So obviously this, no casualties, according to the mayor, no serious damage.
It's good that there are no casualties. I like this comment. The U.S. thinks winning the Cold War gave them the right to do whatever they wanted in the region. They think that they're above having to respect the security concerns of others. Absolutely, and not even just the region, right? Winning the Cold War, after they won the Cold War and the Soviet Union collapsed, the U.S. thought they could do anything they wanted anywhere, right? This is why in 1990 the Gulf War started, because the Soviet Union was in the process of collapsing. So the U.S. realized they could invade Iraq and bomb them to a pre-industrial state and then put them under sanctions and invade and occupy the country years later, because they could. There was no longer this umbrella of protection that Vijay Prashad writes about in this book, Red Star Over the Third World. There was no longer this umbrella of protection over the rest of the world, over the Middle East, Middle Eastern countries, South Asian countries, African countries, Latin American countries. When the UN was created, when the United Nations Security Council was created, the first 50 or so vetoes were the Soviet Union vetoing the U.S., trying to invade some country, trying to take some military action against a country and colonize them, right? Having the Soviet Union and having them as a part of the UN Security Council provided this umbrella of protection over countries like Iraq. And, of course, over nations like Ukraine that were a part of the Soviet Union, of course. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, you have the Gulf War, you have the Iraq War. U.S. gets way more involved in Afghanistan, take out Libya, take out Syria, or try to take out Syria. And, of course, what they're doing in Ukraine. And they've privatized and plundered all these previously Soviet countries, and now they feel that they can use them as ways to attack Russia, as proxies to weaken and destroy Russia. So yeah, the end of the Cold War had huge implications for what the U.S. was able to do in terms of imperialism. And right after the Cold War, they started the War on Terror, right? There's always got to be a war on something in an imperialist nation. We always got to be at war with something, even if it's abstract, even if it's, a war on terror, a war on communism. We're always going to war with something. Got to keep the military-industrial complex profits high.
But we are seeing separately in Crimea, as you were saying, the Russian Ministry of Defense is saying they averted 17.
Collapse of the Soviet Union was a nightmare for the DPRK as well. Yeah, and every communist country, right? Because like China has a trade policy of complete non-interventionism where they'll trade with anybody, including like Israel. But the Soviet Union was like extremely helpful to countries like the DPRK and Cuba. Like they would go out of their way and sign trade deals with Cuba and the DPRK that didn't help the Soviet Union in any way, just to support those countries because they're ideologically socialist, they're ideologically communist. And the Soviet Union wanted to prop up their allies and prop up revolutions around the world, which honestly, I prefer I understand why China has their trade policy that they do, and it's been very successful. But, the Soviet Union was based for that. They were based for dumping money into revolutionary movements around the world, and for like buying all of Cuba's sugar. Right. So for years, Cuba had basically been a sugar plantation for Western countries, and a tobacco plantation, as well as like Havana, Cuba used to be what Las Vegas is now. It used to be a playground for the rich. But either way, their soil became monocropic. It adapted to only growing tobacco and only growing sugar. So it was very hard to diversify Cuban agriculture. It's a very small island, and the island for years had been used to grow just tobacco and sugar plants. So the Soviet Union said, all right, we'll buy like basically all your sugar. Just sell us your sugar. We don't need that much sugar, but we'll just buy it all, so that Cuba can be more successful and can diversify their economy and can use the money from sugar exports to invest in development and circumnavigate the U.S. blockade, the U.S. embargo. After the Soviet Union collapsed, there's no one to buy Cuba's sugar anymore. Right, so that's what they call the arduous march in the DPRK and the special period in Cuba. It's a time where they're surrounded by the U.S. military, who's enforcing an embargo, not letting any trade in or out, and they no longer have the Soviet Union to give them preferable trade deals. So it was disastrous for the whole world, and this is it's another reason why it's ridiculous for Westerners to just dismiss the Soviet Union and call them all evil and bad and just internalize all this propaganda about the Soviet Union. Like, you have no idea what that red star in Russia meant to the third world. You have no idea what kind of umbrella of protection the Soviet Union provided countries like Iraq, who have now been, destroyed by the U.S., had their infrastructure and their industry bombed to a pre-industrial state. Or even the existing socialist countries like Cuba, who are now susceptible to imperialist embargoes, more susceptible because of the collapse of the USSR. It was a nightmare it was the most devastating moment for the global struggle for socialism, the global class struggle, the global struggle for communism in history. And 30 years later now, we're finally recovering. Right? Even in the U.S., right? Even Western communists, so many communists after the collapse of the USSR became liberals, and they're still liberals to this day, right? It's taken 30 years for the socialist and communist movement to recover and for us to actually start gaining ground and start educating people about Marxism here in the West, right? The communist movement has been in tatters for years when it comes to Western communists, But we are recovering. We are making a comeback. Socialism and communism will always be the antithesis of capitalism. They can never fully destroy it, right? It'll always be capitalism's shadow, and it'll always be waiting to explode and grow. And that's what we're seeing today.
Drones, but the head of that region, the Russian head, is saying that an ammunition depot and a house were destroyed. They are apparently evacuating residents within a 5-kilometer radius of that incident. And all of this comes, of course, after a week of Russian strikes on Odessa. Ukraine's digital transformation minister coming out and saying drones attacked, he calls the Orc, that's what they call Russia's capital and Crimea last night. Electronic warfare, he says, and air.
Sorry to keep going on rants about the Soviet Union and what they did for the third world, but this is an important thing to point out too. The CCCP was important for liberation movements in Africa. Vital. Absolutely vital. And that's hilarious that I have Red Star over the third world and I happen to have Marxism in the national question here, which is where the Soviet Union, the Marxist-Leninists, determined that they would support national self-determination, right? So that means all of the anti-colonial struggles in Africa, trying to overthrow the Western colonial capitalist powers, were supported by the Soviet Union. They said, even if you're not socialist, we support your right to national self-determination. We support your right to create your own government. And obviously, a lot of the anti-colonial struggles in the global South were being led by communists, were being led by socialists. So like in Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, but which was formerly called Upper Volta. But the Soviet Union deciding to support that principle, deciding to support the principle of self-determination and all the anti-colonial struggles in the third world was vital to them being successful in a lot of cases, and was super helpful, especially when you have the Western world doing the opposite. The Western world trying to maintain colonialism or, transform it into neocolonialism, not direct control over the country, not direct political control, but just economic control. Control through putting in puppet dictatorships like the Mobutu kleptocracy in the Congo.
Defenses are becoming less and less capable of protecting the occupier's skies. So that's sort of the closest you're going to get, I think, to a claim there.
Yeah, it does sound that way. More reported strikes on grain infrastructure overnight as well, this time on the Danube. This as Putin claims that Russia can actually pick up in replacing lost grain from the deal, obviously, that fell through.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's significant about these overnight strikes is that, one, there seems to be a fair amount of damage. The pictures that are coming out are showing destruction to grain terminals, things like that. Second is that this is not the Black Sea ports, right? This is the Danube ports. So the Danube ports are the plan B. So once the Black Sea ports are not possible to use to transport grain, then they turn to those Danube ports, which they started doing before the grain deal kicked in last summer, which of course now will become more and more important. So that speaks to Russia essentially trying to destroy that effort on top of the Black Sea ports, and all of that coming, as you say, as Putin wrote this article, which was published by the Kremlin on Sunday, where he said, look, Russia can pick up where Ukrainian grain might have left off. Russia will be able to supply African countries with the food they need, an attempt clearly to soften the blow to these allies, which Russia has been cultivating since the beginning of the war, and essentially trying to sort of soften the blow of the fact that cancelling that grain deal will have really threatened their food supply.
Basically trying to play both sides in some ways. Claire, thank you. Well, the US Secretary of State says Ukraine has recaptured about half of the territory Russia seized at the start of the invasion.
Why are these CNN anchors British? Why do they have British accents? Is that just to make them sound more official? We need to hire British people so people believe us.
Actually, Blinken told CNN that Russia has failed to erase Ukraine from the map and that Ukrainian troops are poised to take back even more land as their counteroffensive grinds on.
Now Ukraine is in a battle to get back more of the land that Russia seized from it. It's already...
Hold up. Anthony Blinken on screen. Where is he? Come back, Anthony Blinken.
You suck! You suck! You suck!
It's in a battle to get back more of the land that Russia seized from it. It's already taken back about 50% of what was initially seized. Now they're in a very hard fight to take back.
No, they haven't. No, they haven't. They're lying about the counteroffensive. And this is the main thing I've been trying to point out to people. The Donbass regions like Donetsk and Lugansk, as well as Crimea, voted for their own independence. Of course, the U.S. said, no, they were rigged elections. They weren't. These places voted to be independent and or to join Russia, because for years they were being bombed and shelled and attacked by Ukrainians and the Ukrainian government and Ukrainian extremists since 2014, since the US-backed coup. And in Crimea, they've never wanted to be part of Ukraine. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, there was a vote in Crimea where they said, we'll be independent. We don't want to be part of Ukraine. But they ended up being given to Ukraine. So in 2014, when given the chance again, they voted to join Russia. Now, the U.S. is saying we can't end this war. We can't have a peace agreement until Ukraine reclaims these places, until Ukraine gets back Lugansk, Donetsk, Crimea. But those places don't want to be a part of Ukraine. So you're saying we have to keep fighting a war. We have to keep waging a war against Russia until Ukraine undemocratically seizes these areas of territory. That is what the U.S. is doing. So when they talk about this being a struggle for democracy, right? We're fighting we're supporting Ukraine, the liberal democracy, whereas Russia is authoritarian. No, you're not. You're trying to reclaim places that democratically voted not to be a part of Ukraine, and you're getting hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and Russians killed in the process. You're using them as a proxy to do this and putting out articles like they're willing to fight to the last Ukrainian. They're willing to fight till they have all of their land back. They won't cede even 1 inch of their country. It's like, no, they should cede. They should cede the places that voted to not be a part of Ukraine anymore and sign a peace agreement. Russia has offered multiple peace agreements, basically saying, give us the Donbass, give us Crimea, the regions that voted to join Russia, and then we'll call it a day. We'll have peace there. And, obviously you'll have to probably do something about the right sector and the Azov battalion and all these Nazi groups that have become like a part of the Ukrainian government. But of course that would be worth it at this point. You can end the bloodshed. You can end the destruction of Ukrainian infrastructure. You can stop sending billions of dollars of U.S. tax dollars into Ukraine. if you agree to a peace agreement and just cede these areas of land that, like I said, voted to become part of Russia. But they won't do that because this proxy war isn't about freedom and democracy in Ukraine. It's never been about freedom and democracy in Ukraine. It's about NATO taking Ukraine as if it's a club, an inanimate object, and trying to beat Russia over the head with it, and not giving a shit how many Ukrainians die in the process, just doing everything they can to keep this war going and convince the American public that it's a war for freedom and democracy. When what they're trying to do here is explicitly undemocratic, right? They're trying to claim these areas of land that don't want to be part of Ukraine because they've been shelled and had their children and families killed by Ukrainian artillery and Ukrainian military forces since the U.S.-backed coup in 2014.
To take back more. These are still relatively early days of the counteroffensive. It is tough. The Russians have put in place strong defenses, but I'm convinced that with the equipment and support they've received now from more than 50 countries, with the training that their forces have gotten, and many of the forces who've gotten that training have not yet been put fully into this fight, and maybe more than anything else, with the fact that, unlike the Russians, the Ukrainians are fighting for their land, for their future, for their country.
Blinken also says,
You disgusting liar. If there's an afterlife, and I hope there is, and if it's like a heaven and hell type deal, this guy will be punished in the afterlife for what he's doing here on Earth. I cannot think of a more disgusting way to use your life energy, your time here on Earth, your very limited time here on Earth. This guy is using his life to lie the American public into a war of expansion, into an imperialist project to destroy Russia. And he's telling them this is Ukraine fighting for their freedom. This is Ukraine fighting for a democracy, right? This is Ukraine fighting for their own land, even though these areas are not Ukraine's own land. They voted now to join Russia or to be independent. He's lying in order to continue getting millions of people killed because it serves the U.S.'s geopolitical interests and helps make money for the military-industrial complex. While his own countrymen in America are struggling, while 40,000 people are dying every year because they don't have health care, while older people can't afford memory care for dementia and Alzheimer's and things like that, while everybody in this nation is drowning in debt, and he's just continuing to send billions to Ukraine, shaming anybody, calling anybody who doesn't support it a Putin supporter, and trying to convince the entire American public that we're truly fighting for democracy by lying and distorting the facts of the issue. If there's an afterlife, this guy's going to hell, legitimately. Like, what a disgusting, disgusting man. What a disgusting waste of a life. How many millions of people has Anthony Blinken and Victoria, or how many, at least, thousands and thousands of people have Anthony Blinken and Victoria Nuland gotten killed in this imperialist project by deceiving an entire nation? Disgusting human beings. Couldn't be me. Couldn't be me. Give me all the opportunities to sell out in the world. All right? I would rather die poor and diseased and alone on the streets than be Anthony Blinken or be anything like him. He disgusts me to my core. And he should disgust you too, as should this whole proxy war in Ukraine. Childhood friends with Ghislaine Maxwell kind of says it all about Blinken. Blinken is an a-hole. Makes me sick. Yup. Boo, Anthony Blinken. All right. Anyone got questions, comments, topics of discussion? As Vijay Prashad says, Blinken and the U.S. ruling class are mediocre. They are. They are. They're the most mediocre people. They're they're the kind of people you wouldn't want to hang out with, or you would think are losers in real life. But they're in positions of power, and they're extremely vindictive towards Russia and towards the rising powers in the East, towards China and the BRICS alliance. Ooh, you know what we should cover today is Philip DeFranco's video. About Ukraine. Actually, I gotta pee first, and then we will jump into Philip DeFranco. If I can find it. Just pure misinformation. Actually, I can find it here. So I'm going to run to the bathroom, and then we'll debunk Phil's misinformation. But it's crazy because we've had 7 TikTok accounts removed for misinformation. And then whenever Phil says something that's proved wrong by studies or facts or various reports, I talk about it. I say, look, Philip DeFranco is literally doing misinformation here. He has a video like saying that Russia blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, right? So I made a video saying, no, this is misinformation. Look, reports are now saying that the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, just like I said, and got removed for it. But there's no response from TikTok. There's no response from the NATO operatives and the national security agents who manage TikTok's content. They just allow Philip DeFranco to continue lying because he's lying in the service of NATO. He's lying in the service of the U.S. empire, and they're okay with that. So we'll talk about that in a sec, but I gotta pee. So try and find myself here. I'm trying to find a video for you guys to watch. All right, enjoy this video of me wrestling while I pee, and I'll be right back to destroy Phil.
Senior Division Greco-Roman wrestlers, your final bout number for this session is 230. 230. Senior Division Greco-Roman wrestlers, your final bout number for this session is 230.
One red.
230. Our next session will begin at 4 o'clock. Senior Greco-Roman, last bout number 230, and your next session begins at 4 with semifinals and consolation matches.
This dude was running. He did not want the smoke. He was just trying to stay away from me. I'm like, come here, you son of a bitch. Come to your uncle. I got my hips in there. My hips are too far out. I just wanted him to let me grab him, though. He just kept pulling away. Like, wrestle me. I should have ducked him there. Okay. Phil DeFranco time. So this is another example of Philip DeFranco posting blatant misinformation on TikTok and getting away with it. He posted
Russia just threatened to declare
that Putin was going to declare war on South Africa or vice versa. Just absurd claim.
Russia just threatened to declare war on South Africa, right? South Africa has been warning Putin to not physically come to the country next month because they have a legal obligation to arrest him. But Putin doesn't care and says he's coming.
The U.S. has been doing that. South Africa said Putin is a head of state. South African leadership said Putin is a head of state and we're not going to arrest him. We'll have diplomacy with him. And the U.S. has said, no, you have to arrest him. You have to arrest him, please. And then South Africa responded by joining BRICS.
Coming to South Africa no matter what, and if they arrest him, it's war. And so now South Africa is asking the International Criminal Court for permission to not arrest Putin due to the Russian threat of war. Follow to stay in the loop.
They said they're not going to arrest him. And at no point did Russia say they would start a war with South Africa. They would invade South Africa. In fact, Russia and South Africa are building stronger ties, building stronger economic ties through BRICS, which is exactly what's angering the U.S. so much, which is exactly why they're spreading propaganda about South Africa and trying to sow dissent, trying to say that Russia wants to invade South Africa when that's never something that they said. Ever. Never, ever, ever, ever. And all the liberals and Philip DeFranco's comments on TikTok are saying, wow, I thought the BRICS countries were strong. I thought the BRICS countries were going to replace NATO and the U.S. What idiots. Now they're going to war with each other? No, you dumb shits. You're the idiots. You're being tricked by Philip DeFranco into thinking South Africa and Russia and the BRICS countries are going to go to war because that's what the U.S. and NATO wants. And Philip DeFranco is nothing but a mouthpiece or a propagandist for NATO. Literally, he just it's like Victoria Nuland is writing his damn scripts or something. So yeah, keep telling yourselves, you stupid Americans who watch Philip DeFranco, keep telling yourselves that BRICS is falling apart, that the BRICS countries are going to war with each other, and that the American empire and the NATO empire are going to last forever. You sound so arrogant and stupid. But blatant misinformation here by Phil. Blatant misinformation claiming that Putin and South Africa are going to war when it's the U.S. who's urging South Africa to arrest Putin, right? South Africa explicitly said that they wouldn't. So this is what I tweeted. Philip DeFranco's recent video, which garnered millions of views on TikTok, is blatant misinformation. DeFranco claims that Putin threatened to declare war on South Africa if he's not allowed to visit the country, which is a bold-faced lie. In reality, South African leadership said that arresting Putin would be an act of war in response to U.S. officials pressuring them to cut ties with Russia and arrest Putin if he visits. Right? So it wasn't Putin saying there would be war with South Africa if they arrest him or whatever, although they probably would if they actually arrested him. I don't know. It was the U.S. saying, no, you can't have him in your country. You need to arrest him. You need to arrest him because he's an international war criminal. And South Africa said, no, he's a head of state. Right? If we arrested him, that would be an act of war. That's not them threatening Russia with war. That's not Russia threatening them with war. That's saying if we arrest someone who's on a diplomatic visit and hold their head of state hostage, that would be an act of open warfare. That would be us, South Africa, siding with NATO and the U.S. against Russia in a conflict that has nothing to do with us. Right? So they're saying we're not going to arrest him. We're not going to do what NATO wants us to do. We're not going to declare war on Russia. And Philip DeFranco twists that into Russia threatening South Africa with war in the scummiest way possible. There is absolutely zero evidence that Putin threatened South Africa with war if he's barred from the country. Kremlin says it did not tell South Africa that Putin arrest would mean war. South Africa says arresting Putin would be a declaration of war. That's what happened. Both countries say they mutually decided to cancel Putin's visit in order to avoid increasing global hostilities, aka provoking the U.S. and NATO. So basically they said Putin's not going to visit because we know that the U.S. would freak out and say, why didn't you arrest him? And it would increase hostilities. So again, it's the U.S. creating conflict, creating problems, creating hostilities, and trying to say it's all Russia doing it. And Philip DeFranco carrying water for the U.S. State Department. Despite his lack of evidence, DeFranco confidently proclaimed to his audience of millions that Putin threatened South Africa with war. And TikTok US allows him to lie despite their policy against misinformation, which has often been weaponized against anti-imperialist accounts like Midwestern Marx. We're currently banned from live streaming on TikTok for some very tame statements about Stalin. Philip DeFranco is a brainwasher of children who's being propped up by the deep state agents that have captured the TikTok app ever since it was handed over to a Texas-based company called Oracle in 2022. The point of DeFranco's video is to sow dissent amongst BRICS countries, who are growing in strength by the day. If you can't beat them, lie about them. And of course, for those who don't know, why Midwestern Marx isn't even allowed to post anything, even the most tame things on TikTok without getting our whole account stripped. Yet Philip DeFranco is allowed to lie and brainwash kids with blatant misinformation. It's because TikTok is now run by NATO operatives and national security agents. Shout out to Mint Press News for this. And it has been ever since they forced TikTok to hand over their US-based servers to a company in Texas called Oracle. So yeah, there's your TikTok update for the day. It's crazy the blatant censorship that goes on that app. The blatant favoritism. Philip is a moron. I don't know if he's either a moron or he's literally like a federal agent. A lot of people think he's actually a Fed. I could see it, honestly. I could absolutely see it. All right, y'all. That's all I got planned for today's stream. I was going to do a Q&A, but it looks like we're not getting as many super chats or whatever and questions as we were during the stream with Carlos last night. So maybe y'all got all your questions out then. I'll come back and hopefully do another stream with Carlos or Noah later today. That's the plan right now. I do have wrestling practice at 3. So I'm going to go get ready for that and practice. But I do want to do another stream tonight. It's always fun to do the power hour, but the power hour, I like to keep them quick, like to keep them short and sweet, touch in with you guys for an hour, hour and a half, and then pop out. But maybe do a later stream with Carlos, like I said, or maybe I'll see what the RBN guys are doing, hop on their show or have them on here. But either way, thank you all for watching. Appreciate you all for joining the Eddie Liger Power Hour. Midwestern Marks, or patreon.com/Midwestern Marks if you want to support us financially. If you can't do that, just like and share the stream. We appreciate that. We're getting very, very close to 35,000 subscribers on YouTube, which thank you all so much for that. Make sure to subscribe if you're not yet, because we're at 34,956 subscribers. So very, very excited to hit that milestone of 35. We've been working so hard on it, grinding despite the algorithmic suppression, despite having our TikTok accounts wiped off the face of the earth and all our followers stripped from us. We're still grinding, and they can't defeat us because we have the science of Marxism, Leninism on our side. So we're just going to continue to grow, and 35,000 subscribers is a great symbol of that. So, all right, without further ado, I don't know what I was going to say. Without further ado, I'm going to end the stream, I guess. All right, see you, everybody.